Welcome back to an Eye on AI, and today we are going to discuss Google Agentspace, a new platform enabling organizations to deploy AI agents powered by Google Gemini and Google Search technology. To dive deeper into this topic, we have with us Justin Hartung, Principal Architect at Egen, and Justin will share insights on the practical applications of AI agents, which industries stand to benefit the most, and how organizations can overcome implementation challenges. Justin, it's good to have you back on the show.
It's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. And today we are going to talk about Google Agent Space. Before we kind of deep dive into the impact on business, let's quickly give our viewers a quick summary who may not be aware of what is Google Agent Space.
When ChatGPT came on the screen, like everyone started building these chatbots, and one of the big challenges is companies had to build a lot of RAG so that they could index all their knowledge and all the information at a company, so they can now start to use that in that LLM kind of chat modality. What Agentspace is Google does all that for you. They have their backend that does all the indexing and ragging so that you can just focus on starting to issue queries and interact with Gemini that's grounded and based on your own internal knowledge. And they also provide a lot of connectors so you can pull in all that knowledge and information from a bunch of the systems that you already have. They also have, as part of that ecosystem, is the ability to act or take agentic actions on top of that. So a good example is, how do I find all the employees or the potential candidates I was interviewing, and then maybe automatically schedule some appointments to go chat with them. You can now start to do that end to end without having to interact with a tech person to go build that for you.
Can you talk about what kind of new possibilities for automation and productivity across organizations is agent space unlocking? What is the promise of AI agents?
So AI agents, and I think this is an overused term or underused depending on your perspective. I kind of see this as, if you remember back when we had enterprise message buses, you have APIs, and you had this magic world where things could discover what to call and then go call them for you. Well, that's really what is starting to become a reality, because you can now start to say, I need to do X, and then the system can figure out, well, how do I get X done and go do it for me? Now, the flip side, though, is Agentspace isn't all that. Agentspace is more of your entry in for business users to start to do some of that ad hoc work. And I'll call it ad hoc work as opposed to like industrialized scale. So a lot of situations, we work with businesses, and we go usually department to department working with the business to help understand their business process and then help map that to like the type of AI problem that works really well. And oftentimes it just ends up being like how to do the prompts really well to help drive your outcomes. So a very good example is we worked with a group. They had people that were just trying to go and buy parts they needed to have on their factory floor in order to do some contract labor work. And so they had hundreds of people that were just browsing the web to try to find who provides this part, what's the price, what's the lead time, what's the smallest quantity I can order that's not more than what I need. And that ended up being a huge amount of time. So that's a great example where Agentspace, with one of the agents that Google provides called Deep Research, can actually do that. You give it a prompt that says, here's the part I need. Who distributes it? Who sells it? What's the current price? What's the inventory level? And it effectively is doing a bunch of web searches for you behind the scenes, and then gives you a report that allows you to help understand what's the optimal purchase. So that's just an example of that kind of ad hoc workflow that you can automate without having, again, to talk to a programmer to go build it for you. Would I want that to go now and do all my buying for me? Probably not. That's where you have to drop down into that industrialized scale that might be a little bit more of that traditional IT project, but still in a lot easier way.
When it comes to leveraging AI agents, are there certain industry verticals or functional areas that are ideal places to start for early adopters?
As with many things that are new technologies, people don't yet understand the best ways to use it. And so there's this journey that we're all going through, which is, people have a hypothesis and test a scenario out. And from that, you learn a lot more about what are the other use cases that are that work really well. And so that again is, I'd say, probably the bulk of the work we do is sitting with companies to help them apply AI in the right kind of way, to help them really develop that, accelerate and develop that scar tissue so they don't have to, cut themselves by their own efforts trying to figure out what works and doesn't. And so that's part of the program, is figuring out, well, what are the right business cases that will apply to it. And I mentioned Agentspace as that ad hoc usage, we all in every one of our days, we have a lot of that things that just feel like it's busy work that you have to go and do a bunch of things, touch a bunch of tabs and move data around. Like that's that ad hoc analysis, that ad hoc place where teams will start to find, I'll call it prompts that they could kind of package up as an agent space and then share with their team so that other people could take advantage for that journey for them. But then it's really like once you are working with the business, we find that there are some use cases where it's much better to what I'll call that industrialized scale of agentic workflow. And that's when we will build all the scaffolding and the governance and the right kind of frameworks so that companies can use it responsibly, so that they don't end up on the front page of New York Times.
You mentioned some exciting use case there, but what are some of the most impactful use cases that are emerging for AI agents?
Some of the earliest ones we had, I'll call that have made really large impacts for our customers. I'll call it the stare and compare category of use cases. So anytime you have a human that looks at some kind of document or visual image and has to fill in a form with data, like the traditional data entry, this is a scenario that becomes very easy to start to leverage Gemini in particular with its multimodal capabilities. Traditionally, you would have had to build OCR, you would have had to map this box means this that goes to this form. And now you could just wrap that in a prompt and run it through a workflow that will then pre-populate the form. And so a lot of times we will come into a company where they have hundreds of employees that are doing this, and we will pre-scan the documents and pre-populate the form, but then automatically like you hover over the form field in their existing application, and just shows exactly where in the document it pulled that data from. So now those humans, instead of having to just stare and compare, they can actually look and verify and validate that this is accurate. And then we'll measure things like how accurate was the model. And based on that, you could tweak the prompts. And at a certain point, if it's like 100% accurate, you don't need to use the humans or waste the human time doing that analysis. So that's a whole category that you could find in almost every single business.
Agentspace has the power to enable users to build and deploy agents. What are some of the challenges organizations face in getting started and how they can overcome these challenges?
Absolutely. So sometimes like we all have that problem where the analysis paralysis, where this world is so overwhelming and moving so fast, sometimes people have a hard time understanding where to start. And that is one of the reasons why we work with our customers to help bring some structure to like, hey, let's start with this. Here's the hypothesis. Here's the hypothetical business case. Now let's go prove it out. Does this match that outcome? The flip side, though, is when people just use some of these tools, it seems like magic. And if a company rushes to incorporate that at production scale and make autonomous decisions without going through the right kind of checks and balances and guardrails, I'll say that's an irresponsible use of AI. Like, oh, it looked awesome in a POC. Now let's have it automatically make decisions on claims for insurance, and then it starts denying everybody. Like these are the types of things that you have to be very understanding of what's happening and gradual. So like when we're using something to build automated business processes, I'll pick on the claims denial as an example. You don't want to just let it start making decisions. You have to let it run in shadow with humans and understand what would AI have done versus what do your humans and your policies enforce. And you could even use different agentic modalities to then check that answer to then gauge, is this a good outcome or not? Then gather all this data so that you could understand how well this is working, and then have an A/B experiment where you're just gradually rolling it out, and so that when something goes wrong, if it does, then you can very quickly control it, and then you have the whole audit log of exactly what decisions were made, what data was used, and that more thorough audit log is critical for enterprises to build all that scaffolding network. So if I was to summarize it, getting the sizzle takes 5% of the work, but without the rest, that 95% of the work, you're setting yourself up for disaster.
As more and more organizations are exploring agent-based workflows, what role does ongoing training and enablement play in driving meaningful adoption across teams?
Oh, that's a great question, and probably something that I think us techies always forget about the importance of humans in this equation. Training and enablement is critical, and so like in Agentspace, it's not like I wouldn't approach it like a traditional project where you say, hey, let me just turn it on for everybody and hope everyone starts using it, because they won't have that kind of knowledge about when should I use that versus when do I need that industrialized scale. So that's one of the most important things I'll say that we do is almost set up this university might be the wrong term because there's a lot of different types of training that you need. You need to have the executives have awareness of the types of AI that exist and how you map business problems, and then understanding like the trade-offs, the cost benefit, because honestly, sometimes humans, even if they are take longer, they're way more efficient in the overall scheme of things. And so trying to figure out when do you want to bring those tools to humans is an important business decision to make, all the way down to like the people that are working and interacting with AI, helping to understand how do I provide feedback so that we don't let the technology run wild, but rather we can actually provide guidance and it becomes a more effective tool. All the way down to, I'll call it the pipeline builders in IT that are building the right and capturing the right data so that we can now make reporting and better decisions and understand like top to down, when is this data needed? How will it be used? What is the business impact, et cetera. So I think that's critical. An element I haven't talked about that I think is even more critical now, but has always been critical, is that awareness of the business challenges that we're trying to solve. So I love to go in and have teams do a business review process where they kind of look at the end-to-end flow of how a company makes money and what are all the costs that go into that. So that when we are starting to provide automation, we can do it with that context. Not just simply like, hey, I was told I need to do X, but we could find opportunities to say, do we even need to do X? And how do we completely circumvent processes that are no longer relevant in this AI and agentic world?
And as we're talking about how our organizations are trying to leverage AI agents, can you also talk about what role is Egen playing in this ecosystem? How are you folks enabling these organizations to get most out of these agents?
Absolutely. So, and this will probably be one of the big differentiators that I'm told from our customers. They love working with Egen, is that we're not a type of company where you just throw things over the fence to us and we do it for you. Yes, we can, but as these are journeys that is about that knowledge, enablement, and training. So a lot of companies will hire us to help start their journey, and we sit with them, embedded in their business, embedded with those different folks to help understand how to use the technology. We also bring a lot of our technology accelerators that are usable software, reusable software assets that help apply to many different use cases. A great example is how you take those prompts with all that governance and those guardrails and the data to understand the decisions that are being made. And every use case, we implement a little bit of this technology at a company, and it starts to build like these modular building blocks that they can leverage to build all these additional use cases and start getting additional value. And what we find is our companies, not only do they jumpstart the journey, but they start to scale out the ability to autonomously build these agentic workflows. And then we're helping them even on the edge of like understanding what's the next like critical things they can push to help really change the business model or their equation. Like some great examples is I remember the CTO of a company came to us and said, "Hey, we'd worked with another cloud and had a couple failed POCs, and I think I'm going to get canned if I don't show some kind of progress." So we came in with an accelerator to go look at that stare and compare workflow, and within 6 weeks we had that implemented doing like A/B testing in production. And I think it was 6 weeks later they were able to negate the need to hire 2,000 employees based on a wave of work that was coming their ways. So this is the kind of, we just think about if you go to your boss and say, hey, instead of that 2,000 people I told you we had to hire, we were able to do this automatically and get higher quality and better results so that the people we do have can give us a much more volume of our core product. And that's a winning answer that we can help companies get to very quickly.
When we're talking about this challenge, I also want to talk about beyond these technical limitations, are there other reasons, hesitations, hurdles? It could be privacy, it could be security, where organizations are a little bit skeptical of using agentic AI.
Oh, absolutely. I think security is paramount. If you can't understand exactly how your data is used and how it is not used, and have contractual obligations from the provider, then you should be really questioning what you're doing. Because it may seem like magic, but trust me, they're making money some way on that. And so that again is one of the things that we love about Google. And I spent actually years working at Google as well. The stack is so thorough how they protect security at every single layer, and they start with the default of protection and the default of secure. And in many cases, you can't even turn off, whether it be from encryption at rest all the way to at transit and every layer in between. So Google has very strong controls that will protect their customers' data and is only used by the customer. They never have access to it in any other way. And so that I think is critical. If you don't like, there's some great tools out there that you can use just on the internet for free, and there are some models that are unknown as to how they leverage the data and what are the tasks they do. And we're starting to see some things that look too good to be true, and then there's exploits, and people's data are ending up in other ways. So yes, this is a critical element to your program: is how do you secure your data and ensure what you're doing is responsible. And I will say that I can't speak too much on it, but in the Agentspace ecosystem, the amount of governance tools that they are building and supporting that really address needs that don't get met today. So a good example is, how do you start to put policies in place as to what data goes from humans through the agentic flow, and then what data makes its way back? Like, how do you be this proxy that helps understand not only what is exchanged, but then how do you start to set enterprise policies that the system will adhere to? And that's something that I haven't seen a whole lot happening. That Google, I think, is making incredible strides, and just you got to have to stay tuned for some of the great features that they're coming out with.
Can you also talk a bit about the role of culture, the role of, we always talk about supply and demand of talent, skill gap is there. What kind of challenges you're seeing organizations face when it comes to that they want to deploy these technologies, but they feel that their teams are not ready?
You're right. The training, there's the, I'll call it the knowledge workers and the business users, not the tech users. How do you leverage AI and learn how to use it? And there's also the engineers and the developers. The beautiful thing about Agentspace and Google's models, in my opinion, is that they've designed them to instill curiosity. And so rather than just say, here's the answer and be done, it prompts a little bit in a subtle way so that people learn why. And they're enticed to, like, well, here's the grounding, here's why this answer exists. And I used to think that if AI could take the place of all the assistants that we used to throw, work to, and that's how they cut their teeth to learn and develop their own scar tissue, I was worried that, are we kind of not giving anybody, the next generation, the opportunity to learn? But what I'm seeing now is that generation is asking AI and using AI as a mentor along with their human mentors. And so they're actually accelerating their development and their curiosity. And so it no longer is limited to people that only know how to code or have that knack on how they could have a scaled impact at their company. So I actually think that and Agentspace in particular is starting to instill this self-fulfilling learning process in a very powerful way. And so that's why we love going from group to group inside of companies, because when you start to help a group understand the benefit and it becomes an indispensable part of their daily job, they start bragging to all their friends about how great it is. And that starts to create the momentum when people receive real value from it. Then the rest of, like, the lagging ability to adopt it, everyone starts getting the FOMO, the fear of missing out. So they want to be part of it too, and they start to get real value. It just is, again, the self-fulfilling prophecy.
Justin, thank you so much for joining me today and share your insights on this topic. And I look forward to chatting with you again and maybe even see you in person at
Thank you,
some of
Nancy.
these events. But I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Well, Swapnil, always a pleasure. And yeah, happy to have that. I know we keep meaning to, like, at KubeCon or something, meet up. One of these years we'll make it happen.